On a sunny morning on the UCLA campus, feminist club members were making their final preparations. On this day, which was filled with the excitement of spring, the front hall of the Student Union building was much more crowded than usual. Colorful banners, posters, and cameras surrounded the hall. Today was a special day. The Feminist Club would be making its most ambitious live broadcast in recent years, a conversation filled with deep and bold questions about women's rights. Who their guests would be was kept a secret. However, a few people among them had heard whispers that a special surprise guest would be coming. These rumors excited not only the club members but also most of the campus, and the minutes of the live broadcast were being counted. Club President Elise took one last look at her checklist as she walked to the edge of the stage in her red pantsuit. The nervous smile on her face clearly showed that she wanted everything to go flawlessly. The camera operator adjusted the frame while the two moderators next to Elise repeated the final sentence. Everything was going as planned until the door quietly opened. The sound technician was the first to notice the man entering the hall from the back door. Silence slowly fell over the hall, along with his black suit, silver tie, and the security corridor around him. As people turned to look, surprise first echoed in whispers, then in loud questions such as, "Is it really him?" Donald Trump had entered the hall. At first, everyone thought it was a joke. There were even panickers among the club members. While Elise was backstage looking for her advisor on her phone, Trump made his way to the stage. Neither the camera stopped nor the lights went out. Everything was on record. The hall was silent, as if frozen except for the rhythmic sound of Trump's shoes on the stage board. When Trump came to the podium, he tilted the microphone slightly and spoke in his familiar, confident tone. "I hear that women's voices are rising here. I think that's great, but it might be time to hear some truth." The live broadcast had started at that moment. The moment, which was broadcast live on YouTube, spread across campus WhatsApp groups in a minute and across social media platforms in 5 minutes. The headline, "Trump Joins Feminist Club Live at UCLA," hit the top of the trending lists. No one knew what was behind this unusual visit, but everyone wanted one thing: to keep their eyes on the broadcast. When Elise finally came to, she struggled to find words because of the shock she felt when Trump came directly to the stage. But as the president of the Feminist Club, she knew that retreating was not an option. She slowly walked up to the stage and took the microphone. Her voice was both angry and diplomatic. "Mr. Trump, you were not invited to this broadcast. This is a feminist forum. We are here for women's lives, for the struggle for equality, and for their voices to be heard. It is, frankly, surprising to see you here." Trump smiled slightly. "That's exactly why I am here," he said. "If you want true equality, you must first learn to hear ideas without censoring them. Everyone can talk, but not everyone can listen." Some students at the back of the room applauded, while others nodded in surprise. The broadcast was live and everyone's eyes were on the screens. Trump continued his speech. "My wife is Melania Trump. She speaks 5 languages. She is quiet but strong. The media, which tries to portray her as a threat to women, has somehow tried to belittle her silence." "Do you ignore women who do not fit into your definition of women in this club?" Elise quickly intervened. "No, diversity and originality are very important to us, but the way you are here is like intruding on women's space." Trump leaned on the podium. "But that's the framework you chose, isn't it? You don't get to define what it takes to be a woman. Supporting women isn't just about supporting those who share your ideas." Screenshots began to be shared on social media. TikTok and X exploded with headlines like, "Trump dragged the Feminist Club into a debate," and "A battle of ideas live at UCLA." While some users said, "This guy knows how to create a scene," others said, "Why don't they stop this broadcast?" Everyone was divided. Don't forget to subscribe. This story is just beginning. What comes next will really surprise you. In the second half of the broadcast, tensions between Elise and Trump escalated even further. Elise came up with statistics. Women in America still don't get paid the same as men. The harassment rates, the invisible barriers in employment. Do you think this is a problem that women are making up? At this point, Trump got serious. "Look," he said, "there are problems. I'm not denying that. But not everything can be solved with misandry. Supporting women is one thing, blaming men is another. Women are the pillars of this country, but unity is not built with misandry." At that moment, there was a momentary silence on the broadcast. This time, Trump wasn't just talking, he was thinking, "My first teacher was a woman," he said. "She taught me that nothing comes for free. Some people confuse equality with the superiority of rights these days." Elise responded, "Seeking rights is not superiority. What happens if the voice of the oppressed is not heard? Women, LGBT individuals, minorities, they are all in search of equality." Trump nodded. "I understand, but equality is achieved not only by making space for those who speak up, but also by hearing opposing ideas, because every idea that is silenced can one day be your voice." The first tears began to appear in the audience. This was much more than an interview. This was a battle of ideas, and they were only at the beginning of the broadcast. The number of views of the live broadcast had passed 1 million. It was still being debated whether Trump was using the moment for a media blitz or if he was really trying to send a different message. But one thing was certain: this broadcast would go down in UCLA history. Trump took the microphone, his voice softer this time. "I came here to talk to you, not to fight. We may not agree, but if we hear each other out, maybe things will change." Elise took a deep breath. "Then let's talk, Mr. Trump," she said. "But remember, this is not just your broadcast, it's all women's broadcast." And now the real battle of the broadcast was beginning. When Trump began to speak, not only the words but also traces of the past, deep cracks and distorted echoes were carried into the hall. Elise's voice was still ringing in her ears. "This platform was established to liberate the suppressed voices of women. Your presence is the shadow cast over these stories." But Trump, with his characteristic composure, did not back down. At that moment, a student behind the cameras was updating the live captioning for the audience in front of the screen. "Live on air, a conservative leader on a feminist podium. Where do the boundaries begin?" Although the sentence seemed overly technical, it actually described the heart of the matter. A contradiction that those outside could not see was forming on Elise's face. She was a leader, but she was also a girl. She remembered the day in middle school when her male teacher said, "This is beyond you," the night she cried silently in the women's bathroom, the morning she was warned by campus security just because of the skirt she was wearing. Now in front of her was the man she considered the face of the system. But strangely enough, the man did not run away, but rather seemed to be trying to understand. This was a conflict she had never experienced before. The image of the enemy was being transformed into a human being of flesh and blood on live television. Trump leaned back into the podium. "I did not come here to fight, but if war has been declared, I want to know what that war is about," he said. Then he continued with a sentence, his tone unusually clear. "I want to understand the feminist movement, not belittle it." Elise was startled by this sentence because it sought dialogue, not confrontation. But dialogue could be perceived as weakness among the members of the club she led. Here was where the conflict of character deepened. Elise was now struggling not just with Trump, but with her own role. The young women trusted him, they followed him. But for the first time, she felt this trust weighing heavily on her shoulders. If she truly listened to Trump, would that be considered treason? Or would true equality include truly listening? "You say you come to us with empathy, Mr. Trump. What about the years of derogatory remarks about women? Your references to women being too emotional, too quiet, or too flashy?" Elise asked, her voice coming out firmly for the first time without breaking. Trump's eyes narrowed. He didn't answer immediately. After a short pause, he pulled a notebook out of his pocket. "These are my words," he said, flipping through the pages. "But they are often taken out of context, often judged without reading between the lines." "If you are defending women, why do you use language that categorizes them?" Elise asked. As the sound checker in the broadcast booth adjusted the microphone tones of the presenters, he realized that Elise's voice was no longer just criticizing, it was questioning. This questioning was a sign of personal transformation. Trump replied, "This is probably the first time I've debated a real feminist. In previous debates, people would shout, chant, or avoid context, but you—" His words hung in the air for a moment. "You're doing something else. We disagree, but you're not trying to silence me. That's valuable." A large portion of the audience began posting the moment on TikTok. The first time Trump said "real feminist," comments were circulated thousands of times in a matter of minutes. Social media was going crazy, but Elise wasn't thinking about the impact on social media. In that moment, a part of her looked Trump in the eye for the first time. "It's easy to judge," Elise said, "but it's hard to be a woman. Growing up as a woman, being silent, trying to silence the thousands of voices speaking inside you while being silent, you don't know that." Trump didn't respond. Instead, he bowed his head. "No," he said, then, "I don't know. But I can learn." This was perhaps the simplest yet most serious sentence of the entire broadcast. A man was speaking, not a politician. A human being was listening, not a woman. This was the moment when character arcs were broken. One had taken off his mask, the other had lowered his wall. Don't forget to subscribe. This is not just a broadcast, it is a story of real confrontation. Let us have your ideas. Where do you think real change begins? At that moment, Leah, a third-grade student sitting in the hall, started to cry. This crying was quiet, limited to tears, but everyone who looked at the broadcast noticed her. Elise saw Leah out of the corner of her eye and suddenly remembered how she had cried in that same chair years ago. When her mother got divorced, when her school friends said, "Your family is broken." This broadcast was no longer political. It was a journey into her own youth, her own identity, her own womanhood. "Mr. Trump," Elise said, "maybe your presence is more meaningful than your absence from this platform, because women no longer want to shout, they want to be heard." Trump nodded slowly. "And men no longer have to talk, they have to understand." At that moment, someone unexpected joined the broadcast. A video opened on the screen. She had refused to come to the studio, but she had connected to the broadcast. It was Melania Trump. Her silhouette, emerging from behind the light, approached the camera gracefully. "This broadcast is important," she said in slow but determined English, "because ideas are no longer at war, hearts are being opened." Melania's speech balanced both Trump's defense and Elise's questioning. Tears welled up in Elise's eyes at that moment. No, it wasn't a weakness. This was the first time she had let the fight sink in. And at that moment, Elise turned to Trump. "I'm going to do one last broadcast with you, but this time I won't be moderating. I'll be speaking only as a woman, only as an American." Trump smiled. "And I'll be listening only as a man." The broadcast ended its second half like this, but everyone who watched knew that the real resolution, the real confrontation, would come in the final act. The final hour of the broadcast was still full, but the air was no longer the electric, tense space of the beginning. It was an atmosphere of careful breathing, of questioning boundaries. Elise, holding the microphone in her hands, looked like a human being, not a presenter. She was no longer acting or trying to defend herself. This last part was not a show for her, but a reckoning with her own existence. "What Melania Trump said reminded me of this," she said, her voice slightly shaky but determined. "When we started this club, we just wanted to talk, but over time we turned talking into a kind of struggle. That wasn't a bad thing, but it was incomplete. We forgot to listen." Trump didn't get up. He was no longer dominating the stage, but sitting on stage. For him, this broadcast had started as a challenge, but now it had evolved into something else. The desire to express oneself had given way to a test of understanding, and the questions of this test were more complicated. Does anger bring justice in the face of power or dialogue? "When I came here today, I expected a different encounter," Trump said, his eyes slowly scanning the room. "You might have booed me, I would have answered the questions, and you still wouldn't have changed your mind. But you turned me upside down, because your leader," here he looked at Elise, "didn't silence me. Not only did he not silence me, he tried to understand me." Elise bowed her head. Everyone in the room could see the weight on her shoulders, such a huge responsibility at such a young age. But what made her strong wasn't just the fact that she stood tall with this burden, it was her ability to question that burden when necessary. "We were taught for years that we should speak with anger," Elise said, "because anger forces those who won't hear us to be silent. But today I learned that sometimes it's not anger, but courage that chooses to speak." Don't forget to subscribe, because you're not just watching a live broadcast here, you're watching a mental revolution, and that revolution will be completed with you in the comments. The room was silent. Everyone was waiting for Elise's final words, but he had something else in mind. "Mr. Trump," he said, "if you hadn't been here today, this confrontation wouldn't have happened. But I have to tell you this confrontation wasn't with you, it was with ourselves. In this club, we sometimes think we're strong by silencing other voices. Maybe not you, but many other men are afraid of women's voices, and we shouted against their fear. But we didn't overcome the fear by shouting, we only made its echo bigger." Trump closed his eyes for a moment. The few seconds of silence were the longest on the broadcast. Then he nodded slowly and said, "My wife is a silent woman." The media portrayed her silence as a deficiency, but in her silence I saw the resilience of a lifetime. "You reminded me today of the power of silence. A woman who doesn't shout is also powerful. Someone who defends her ideas not only by shouting but by living them." Melania's voice remained frozen on the screen. It was as if her presence had become a symbol, the invisible, silent form of power. That was what was going through Elise, and this broadcast showed that women can transform not only by speaking out, but also by knowing themselves. In the last minutes, the comments on the broadcast platform exploded. "After watching this broadcast, the concept of feminism grew on me," wrote one. "For the first time, I felt like Trump was speaking from the heart," said another. One of the most striking comments was this: "Elise, thank you for making me think without silencing me." Trump stood up. It was a farewell moment, but it would not be a classic closing. He did not approach the podium, but stood in the middle of the stage. He turned his eyes to the camera. "I want to say something to everyone watching this broadcast," he said. "Life is not a battle of ideas. Life is a way of reaching out to each other. Sometimes our ideas can be sharp, but people are fragile, and fragility is not hostility. It is an invitation to contact." Elise stood up. She approached Trump. There was no protocol between them. They did not shake hands. They just looked at each other with their heads bowed. This was the purest form of agreement. At that moment, two people, two worldviews, two different paths were united in the same line to remain human. As the last 10 seconds of the broadcast were counted down, Elise took the microphone. "This club was founded for women, but today we saw that this club is for being human. We all learned something. Sometimes real change starts with empathy, not anger. Thank you." And the broadcast ended. But that was when the real story began. The next day, the UCLA campus was silent. The hall was empty, the cameras were gathered, the audio cables were removed. But there was something different on the students' faces: curiosity. Questions had replaced prejudices. This was rare. Young people often spoke definitively, drawing clear boundaries. But that broadcast was the beginning of a crack, and light always entered through those cracks. Trump was far from the White House now, but for her, the broadcast was not just a political gesture, but a personal discovery. For Elise, the broadcast was not just a part of the feminist movement. Elle was a turning point in redefining what leadership meant. The new slogan on the clubhouse door that week was, "We will no longer just talk, we will hear." And it was a silent revolution that began with a broadcast. If this story has made you think, leave a comment below. Real transformation begins with an idea, but it becomes meaningful together. Don't forget to subscribe,